Hi, this is A Plus Tutoring, and today I'll be focused on Algebra grade 12. So the questions that we're going to be doing today, I found them from past papers. Okay, so this for solving of x, right? We are solving x. Okay, so we do know how to factorize the quadratic formulas, right? This one is already factorized. So now when it's factorized, because remember when you already have two brackets, right, you already have factorized it. And then now you just need to take each bracket and equate it to 0. Because remember that if anything multiplied by a 0 is 0, right? So since our answer on the right hand side is a 0, that would mean that any of this bracket has to be a 0 to multiply the other and give us a 0. So now we take the first bracket, which is our x squared minus 4 is equal to 0, and then our second bracket, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So now with this one, we now see that it's a difference of perfect squares. Now a difference of perfect squares is when I can find the square root of this number and also find the square root of that number. So now since I can find the square root of x squared is what? X, and the square root of 4 as 2. So now I can open two brackets for this. This is how you factorize perfect squares. And then I have the square root of the first number, right? And then I have the square root of the second number, which is 2, right? And then now as for the sign, it alternates. For difference of perfect squares, one is negative and the other is positive. So now I have three different brackets, right, including this one. So now here I now do the very same thing I did when I was starting, where I took one bracket, equated it to 0, took the other bracket, equated it to 0. So now I take that bracket x minus 2 and I equate it to 0, and then I take x plus 2 and I equate it to 0. So now what I do when I get to this step is transpose this to the other side. So I'll take the equal sign as a border, right? So when this person jumps the border to the other country, she has to change, right? She was negative this side, but now they stamp in her passport, it now becomes positive. So she is now positive. Okay, this one was positive before she jumped over the border. So now meaning the stamp in her passport will be a negative. Okay, and then now we go back to the one we had left this side. We also transpose that. It was negative, so it becomes positive. So now we have three x's. Here we have one x, which is x is equal to 2. We have a second one, which is x is equal to minus 2, and then we have a third one, which is x is equal to 2. So you see that x is equal to 2 is repeated, meaning we can just write it once. So now our final answer for this question would be, let me just scroll down. Okay, our final answer for this question would be x is equal to 2 or x is equal to minus 2. Because if you're to take any of this and go back to the initial question, right, if we take 2 and we put 2 in there, right, we have 2 squared. Okay, let me write it this side. If we put 2, right, we'll have 2 squared minus 4, right, and then bracket 2 minus 4. Apologies, I'm still getting the hang of my drawing tablet at this point, so it's kind of writing itself at some point. Okay, so now 2 squared would be 4, and 4 minus 4, and then here we have, it was 2, not 4. Okay, Okay, so it was 2 over here. So now 4 minus 4 is 0, right? Times 2 minus 2, it's also what? 0. So 0 times 0 gives us the 0 we initially started with, right? Okay, now if we're to have minus 2, right? Minus 2 squared minus 4. Minus 2 squared, remember, any number, once you square it, it becomes positive, meaning it becomes 4 minus 4, right? Which gives us a 0 for the first bracket. And then the second bracket, we now have minus 2, which would give us minus 4. But because we already have a negative, a 0 in the first bracket, it now multiplies with everything and gives us a 0. Okay. Okay, and then we move on to the second question, which is 1 minus x squared is equal to 0. Okay, so this is a quadratic equation. We now have to factorize it ourselves. But then the first thing we need to do with this is we need to remove the minus sign, because we are used to having something like this: x squared plus 2x maybe minus 1 is equal to 0. You see that our x squared is positive. So in this case, our x squared is negative. So we want to try to remove this negative so that it will be positive and it's easier to factorize. So the first thing we're going to do is divide both sides by a negative 1. In this case, you can divide by a negative 1 because you do have an equal sign. It's an equation. Unlike if it was just an expression whereby they just asked you to factorize and there is no equal to 0, you'd have to factor that 1 out and that minus 1 out and then have everything else in here. But in this case, it can get lost into the equation because we're dividing both sides by it. Okay. So once we divide both sides by minus 1, we now have our positive x squared. X squared becomes positive once you divide minus and minus, right? And then minus x divided by minus 1 becomes positive x. And then positive 1, because remember there's nothing this side, meaning it is a positive. Positive 1 divided by minus 1 becomes a minus 1 is equal to 0. Okay, now once you have it in this form, you can now factorize. Remember how we factorize is we find the factors of the first number, because when we open our two brackets, right, we need to have factors of the first number, which is our x squared. So it's going to be x and x. And then factors of the last number. And since it's negative, okay, let's start with the factors of 1. Factors of 1, it's 1 and 1, right? So we have 1 and 1. And then now because it's negative, we know that negative is a product of negative and positive. Because remember this, positive times positive is equal to a positive. Negative times a negative is equal to a positive. And then negative times a positive is equal to a negative. So in this case, we have a negative as our last. So we want to, meaning one of the brackets has to be a positive and the other a negative. So now we do have a positive and a negative. Now we need to find, would these be able to give us the plus 1 in the middle, right? So how do these brackets give us the middle number? They give us the middle number when I take this side and multiply it with that, and I take this one and multiply it with this. Why? Because do you see that this is an x, right? And you only get an x when you multiply an x with the number and x with the number. So in this case, you now multiply x times 1 gives us x, and then minus x times x gives us minus x, meaning in this case I have 0, which is wrong because my middle number, it's a 1. That means that these cannot be my factors. But since these are the only factors of 1, that means we cannot factor using brackets, but you can use the quadratic formula Okay, we can use the quadratic formula instead, because the quadratic formula is the one that allows us to get our answers, our factors as decimals. Because when we use the factoring method, we don't necessarily get decimals, right? Because we look for factors which are whole numbers and integers. So the quadratic formula allows us to find the right factors even if they are decimals and fractions. Okay, so now we go and use our quadratic formula. So going back to the x squared plus x minus 1. So what is b, what is c, and what is a, right? So a is the number attached to x squared, that number before x squared. B is the number before x, and c is the freestanding number, right? So a will be 1 because there's 1 here, right? B would be 1 because x squared has 1. C would be the constant, which is minus 1. Remember that every number takes the sign before them. So if I had a minus here, B would be minus 1. So here it's minus 1, meaning my A is 1, my B is 1, and my C is minus 1. Okay, so now I go and I say x is equal to b, which is 1, meaning minus 1, plus minus. Why do we have plus minus? Is because we have two x's in the quadratic, right? So one is going to be given by the plus and then the other by the minus. Okay, into b squared, which is 1, meaning 1 squared, minus 4. Our a is 1, our c is minus 1. Okay, and then over 2a, our a is 1, meaning it's 2, 1. Okay, now our answer to that would be minus 1 plus minus root of, what is 1 squared? 1 squared is 1. And now what is minus 4 times 1 times minus 1? That would give us a positive 4. Over 2 times 1 would be 2. Okay. Now when we get to this point, we now have equals to minus 1 plus minus root of 5 over 2. Alright, so now our first x would be equal to minus 1 plus root of 5 over 2. Now we put this in our calculator and get what it is. When we use the plus, so it's minus 1 plus root of 5 over 2. And we get 0.618, which would round off to 0.62. Okay, and then now our second would be x is equal to minus 1. Remember, I used plus in the first one, so meaning I'm going to use minus in this one and say root of 5 over 2. And then now I put that in my calculator and I get minus 1,618, which I round off to 62. Okay, so now these would be my answers, my x answers. So when you write them, you know you write x is equal to 0.62, or my tablet is quite very sensitive, or x is equal to the minus 1.62. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, we have root of 4x minus 1 is equal to minus 1. So when we work this out, the first thing we would want to do is to get rid of the root sign. Now, how do we get rid of the root sign? So to get rid of the root sign, we have to square both sides. Square it and also square that side. Right? So squaring gets rid of a root sign. That will just end up with what's inside it. And then we end up with our 4x minus 11 is equal to, what is minus 1 squared? Remember, when we square anything minus, we get a positive, meaning minus 1 squared would give us positive 1. Now when we get to this step, we take anything that does not have x, because we want to solve for x. Anything that does not have x has to leave. We only want x on the other side and then whatever else on the other side. So in this case, x is leaving with minus 11, right? But because we only want x to be leaving alone, we have to kick out minus 11, and minus 11 is jumping to another country. So now when minus 11 jumps to another country, she becomes positive. So now we have 4x is equal to 1 plus 11. And then we now have 4x is equal to 12. But remember, we only want to know what x is. And in this case, x is married to 4. So how do we divorce those two? So divorce is divide. So I'm now going to divorce these two because x is married to 4 and I only want to know what x is. X has to be living alone at this point. So I'm going to have to divorce the 2 by dividing. So now when I divide by the number, I get rid of it, meaning I now have just x. And then 12 divided by 4 will give me 3. And that will be my answer. So if you're to take this 3 and put it back there, you're supposed to get a minus 1. Right? But then, this kind of question, if we take the 3, let's take the 3 and put it back. We take the 3, we have root, right? Root of 4 times 3 minus 11. So root of 4 is, 4 times 3 is 12, right? Minus 11, which will give us what? Root of 1. Which root of 1 is 1. It's positive. Remember that square root of any number, a square root of any number is positive. And under the square root, we also have to have a positive number. Meaning that if we are to have, for example, square root of 25, you know your answer is always going to be positive 5. Unless given a plus minus sign on this side, of which you do not have it. And since you do not have a plus minus sign, that means that your answer for the square root has to be positive. And since you are given as equal to a negative number, that means that this question has no solution. Okay. Yeah, I'll keep practicing on this to get a hang of this tablet. Okay, so this question, yes, you do have to calculate it. There's marks in calculating it, but then your final mark is you actually telling them that it has no solution, meaning x cannot be equal to 3 either way. So this question has no solution because it's a minus. Okay. So our last one for the day, is it our last one? Oh no, it's not. And I thought it was the last one. Okay. So we do have another one with root, right? But in this case, this side, it no longer has just a number. It now has an expression. So now we do the same thing. We need to get rid of the root sign, meaning we're going to square both sides. Okay. So we now have this side squared, that side squared. But remember, when you're writing in an exam or a test, do not do like I'm doing, whereby I'm squaring directly onto the question. Write the question as is first, and then your next step, that's when you can start doing all your squarings. Okay. So after we square, we now have 4x minus 11 is equal to 2 minus x squared. of which this now means that I have 2 brackets, 2 minus x and another 2 minus x. So now I'm multiplying this, and remember, when you're opening these brackets, you are going to be let me see if I can change the color. I'm tired of blue. Okay, you're going to be multiplying this with that, this with that, and then this with that, and with that. Okay, let me write that properly. Okay, this with that. Okay, so our first one was what? 2 times 2, right? So now 2 times 2 would be 4, right? And then 2 times minus, remember the number always takes the side, 2 times minus x, which would be minus 2x, right? Okay, and then now or let me write it like this. Okay, I'm gonna open brackets where I'm doing step by step. I'm gonna show the times. Okay, 2 times 2 is our first step, and then plus 2 times minus 2 times minus x, right? Plus again minus x times 2, minus x times 2, and then plus minus x times minus x, minus x times minus x, right? Now this side I still have my 4x minus 11. I keep bringing it down, so I have 4x minus 11. All right, now on this side I now have a 4, and then here I have minus 2x, and there I also have minus 2x, and then in negative terms, a negative gives me a positive, so I now have plus x squared. All right, and then now I will have 4 minus 4x plus x squared. Okay, you ask, why did we open the brackets in this question since we are trying to find x? We could have just equated to 0. No, we could not, because on the other side, on the left hand side, there is no 0. If there was 0, we'd just take these and equate them to 0. But in this case, there's an expression. So what we are trying to do is combine this entire expressions and make them into one, which will now equate to 0. Okay. Yeah, I kind of misjudged and didn't have space for that one. I don't know what I did. So I'll use this remaining space over here. So we had 4x minus 11 is equal to 4. Okay, we have 4x minus 11 is equal to 4 minus 4x plus x squared. So now I need everything to jump onto one side and have the other as 0. Okay, so you can make it jump to that side, or you can make this jump to that side. It will all be the same. So now I'm going to make everything jump to that side, meaning I have a 0 there. Okay, so I now have 4x going there and minus 11 going that side. So I have 4 minus 4x plus x squared minus 4x. Remember, it was positive, so it became negative. 11 was negative, so it will become positive, plus 11. Right, now I combine like terms. Like terms, it's minus 4x and minus 4x, right? So that'll give me minus 8. Okay, so let me write it in the form that we know. X squared, because x squared doesn't have any other x squared to combine with. X squared, and then minus 4 gives us minus 8x. And then 4 plus 11 gives us 15. Okay, so now we have that. We now look for factors of 15. And factors of 15, we have 15 times 1. We have 5 times 3. And now we look for what factors would give us minus 8 if we were to add them. And you see 5 plus 3 gives us minus 8. So we're going to take 5 and 3. So we now have factors of x, which is x and x squared, it's x and x, and then we took 5 and 3, right? 5 and 3. Now because it's positive and this middle number is negative, only minus 5 minus 3 can give us minus 8. If we were to choose, because a positive number can be a negative number times a negative number, right? Or a positive number times a positive number. So if we were to have plus 5 plus 3, this gives us 8, yes, but what? Positive 8, and here we have negative 8. So we're going to go with the negatives, meaning we have minus and minus. It's equal to 0. So now we go and say x minus 3 is equal to 0, or x minus 5 is equal to 0. We now transpose them. We have x is equal to 3 and x is equal to 5. Okay. Now on to our last one for the day. It's exponent. So with this one we have 2 to the power of x plus 2 plus 2 to the power of x minus 2 plus 2 to the power of x is equal to 42. So remember exponent rules, they say when you're adding exponents, that means that those numbers are multiplying, right? We have the same basis. Our exponent rules say that when we have x to the power of 4 times x to the power of 5, I'm going to say x4 plus 5. Meaning in this case, since I have x plus 2, that means that I have a 2 to the power of x timesing with a 2 to the power of 2, where I can now say x plus 2, right? So now I go plus 2 to the power of x times a 2 to the power of minus 2. Okay. And then I now have plus a 2 to the power of x. Let me also change 42 into its factors. What are the factors of 42? 42 will be 2 times 3 times 7. Okay, according to me putting and saying factors in my calculator, right? But in this case, since we're only working with 2, let's just have 2 times 21, right? Okay, so we'll just leave it as 2 times 21. So now what we do is we take out 2 to the power of x, okay, because 2 to the power of x is the common one, right? In every sum here we have 2 to the power of x, 2 to the power of x, 2 to the power of x. So we take it out, and then what remains here is 2 to the power of 2, plus what remains here is 2 to the power of negative 2, and what remains here is nothing, meaning it's a 1. Okay, and then we have our 2 times 21 for now. Okay, we now have our 2 to the power of x is equal to, multiplied by 4. What is 2 to the power of minus 2? That should be 1 over 4. So it's plus 1 over 4 plus 1 is equal to your 2 times 21. Now let's add 4 plus 1 over 4 plus 1, and that will give us 21 over 4. So we now have 2 to the power of x into 21 over 4, right, is equal to 2 times 21, right? So now I want to get rid of this because I only want to remain with 2 to the power of x. So now getting rid of that is me dividing both sides by it, right? Meaning I'm going to divide both sides by a 21 over 4 and divide the side by a 21 over 4. Now if I divide on this case, you can still work with it as a 42 and not rush to put it in factors like I did. Okay, so if we were to still work it as 42, it would make it easy for you to divide. So we now have 42. Now what is 21? What is 42 divided by 21 over 4? We get 8. So we now have 2 to the power of x is equal to 8, of which 8 can be changed into exponents, which is 2 to the power of 3. So now remember, same base, I can drop the base and I can have the exponents equal to each other. So that will be our last question for the day. Thank you.